Everyone, our friends and the people we know and our additional audience. We're very happy you made time to be with us for today's webinar, which we will dedicate to a few topics. First of all, as we've been doing every week, we will hear an update of the impact of the war, some numbers, what's been happening. Obviously, these numbers keep getting updated. Unfortunately, week by week, we have more numbers to report on. So we'll go through that. That will be Professor Avi Weiss. Next, Nir Kedar will give us his analysis of the state budget that is being passed tonight or being voted on tonight, right, Nir? Especially with a focus on the social ministries, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Welfare. And I have to end my part by saying what I've been saying every time we get together this month. If we do have a warning for sirens in anywhere we're at. So if Nir has it in Jerusalem, Avi will take over because he's in Petach Tikva, and we'll do the same. Hopefully, we won't be interrupted tonight by sirens. So I'm going to just move this on to Avi. Thank you for joining us. I see people still joining, but we're just going to start.
Well, thanks everybody, and thank you, Michal. It's great seeing so many faces. Some I haven't seen in a while, and some I see quite often. So what I'm going to do is we're going to split up the talk as follows. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's been going on, about a little bit about the numbers. The thing is, I don't want to start going into it very, very deeply because we've done this a number of times in the past few weeks. Not last week, but the week before. So I'm just going to not go into the history, just go into a little bit of updating what exactly. Nir's going to talk to you afterwards about the budgetary process. There's a budget that's supposed to be passing tonight, and he's going to talk to you about the budget, which is a very, very important issue. And then we're going to be hearing from Miri because unless I get my update on what's going on from Miri, I never really know what's happening. So we're going to do a little bit of that. And thank you, everybody. So I'm going to start a presentation. If I'm not starting on the right page, somebody will tell me, please. But basically, this is just to update you on what's going on. And many of you have seen parts of this before. So this is the Taub Center's mission. You all know what it is we do. I think everybody here knows the Taub Center pretty well by now. And we cover a lot of fields, and we make sure that we do it the way it needs to be done, and that we can impact policy by doing that.
Avi, I don't see the slides. I don't know if it's only me.
Okay.
How do you see the slides?
No.
Yeah, that actually makes sense because the only thing I forgot to do was to share it. But aside from that, I was seeing the slides fine. I don't know why you had a problem. I hope this is better now. Let's try again.
Now it's in presenter view. No, it's in presenter view.
It's not in the right view.
Okay, so you should have it all now. We're good? Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's happened with the war. As I said, this is the Taub Center. You all, as I said, know us. We are, independent. We make sure we don't get any kind of government funding. We make sure that we do the work that can impact policy in all these different fields that you're seeing here on top. And I'm going to do this very, very quickly because of the fact that I know that we have a lot of content today. We want to make sure that we can get through everything. So let's talk about a little bit about the impact of the war. And I'm just going to show you basically focus on things that are a little bit different than what we've shown before. So we showed the number of fatalities. And basically we've now color-coded them. Unfortunately, over the past week, we've had fatalities, I won't say every day, but almost every day. And what we did was we color-coded them by whether they are soldiers or they're civilians. Now, what you're seeing here is you're seeing that there have been 24 casualties so far, fatalities so far. 19 of them are civilian. There were 9 on that second day with that falling in Beit Shemesh. That was the biggest hit that we had, and we've had 5 of them who are soldiers. So the dark blue is the soldiers, and the aqua color are the civilians. And as you can see, there have been more casualties over the past week. If we take a look at what that means with respect to not just casualties, but you can see that there have been a lot of hospitalizations. Now, in this period over that Saturday night and Sunday, not this week, last week, you saw that there were very, very big hits in Dimona and in Arad, and you had about 500 people, almost 500 people, who were hospitalized. It's divided over 2 days, over the 21st and the 22nd, but you can see that those were very, very significant hits on those days, and you can see that the numbers are high and they continue to amass. Obviously, the 60 for today is not a final number because the day is not yet over. But you can see that the numbers are significant, and you're somewhere in the 200 range on average per day. Now, most of them are not very badly hurt. Most of them are in light condition. But look at the large number of people that you have in the hospitals. You have about 6,000 people who have arrived at the hospitals over this period, and that's a really, really large number. Now, most of them get released fairly quickly, but even if we take a look at the latest number that we have at the moment, is that there are about 185 people who are currently hospitalized from the attacks, and that includes people who are in the emergency room currently. As I say, this is not updated to the minute, but it's approximate to what we're seeing. If we take a look at the number of people who have been evacuated, what you're seeing here in these different movies on the screen are 4 different attacks that happened. The one all the way to the left is the first one that happened in Tel Aviv. The one to its right is Beit Shemesh, where there were the largest number of casualties. The one to that right is in Tel Aviv from the past few days, and the other one that we're seeing is the one from Dimona, where you see an incredible amount of damage. You can see that the number of people who have been evacuated here is incredibly large. It's over 5,000 people. And when you take a look at the damage that's happened, so you've had property claims of over 20,000 claims that have been put in already. And even if you just say that 20,000 claims, let's say it's only 100,000 shekel per claim. Why 100,000? That would be the cost of a non-expensive car in Israel. Certainly, there's a lot of damage to apartments and things like that. That will be much higher. But even if you're talking about only 100,000 shekel per claim, that's 2 billion shekel in damages. And if it's 200,000, then that's 4 billion shekel. So these numbers are amassing, where at the beginning the amount of damage was not nearly as big. It now is definitely climbing. If we take a look at the number of sirens inside of Israel, so you can see that the number of sirens and we basically have 2 colors here also. At the beginning, it was all from Iran. Afterwards, it was mostly from Iran, and it continues to be mostly from Iran. But there is a growing number that we've seen coming in from Lebanon, and if we take that in percentages. Well, here the alerts from where it's coming from. It's where it's going to. The alerts are mostly, or a very large percentage, are in the center of the country, which includes Tel Aviv and the Jerusalem area. More in Tel Aviv than in the Jerusalem area. You see quite a bit in the north. That's largely not only from Iran, but it's a lot that's coming from Lebanon also. And you also see in Beersheba area, where you see a lot of people that's down here, where you're seeing a lot of attacks that have happened there also. If you take a look at, if you take these numbers from the number of sirens, and you blow each one up to 100%, so then you can see what percentage of each one of each day's missiles are coming from Iran and what's coming from Lebanon. And what you can see is that the percentage from Lebanon has gone up to about 30% in some days, 20%, 30%. It was obviously much lower at the beginning, but it's been very significant, and that continues to be very significant. If you just take a look at what's happened to credit card spending, so I think this is very interesting. At the beginning, you had a large decrease in credit card spending during the first week and the second week of the attacks. You had a very, very large decrease in the amount of spending in pretty much all categories except for food, where people are buying in supermarkets, and that obviously didn't go down because people needed to continue. In fact, people were stockpiling for their safe rooms. But what you see is that the numbers have gotten smaller. In other words, they've gotten back to the norm more than you might even expected. And when you look at the total over here on the left-hand side, it's basically barely there at this point. In other words, you're very, very close to what was there originally. I think it might even be slightly positive. In other words, slightly higher than it had been in the week before the war started. but that's a very, very big change that's happened over time, and it's naturally happened over time because a lot of things have gone back to normal, or at least to some semblance of normal, compared to what was occurring before that. If you take a look at that, when you compare it to when you compare this last week from the 15th to 21st of March, you compare that with the week before. That should not be like that. That should be saying 21 to 28. My typo. That should be from 21 to 28. In other words, the week before the war started. So it's not the same as the graph on the bottom. It's a little bit different because we're not able to do that comparison. But basically, the idea here is to show you that, it's different in different cities. The cities that were hit harder, the cities that were getting a lot more bombings, they were affected a lot more than those who were getting a lot less. So there wasn't that many bombings in Sderot. There was a lot less in Jerusalem than you had in Tel Aviv. And you're getting, naturally, that the biggest effects are happening in the cities that are having that had the most amount of bombings, the amount of bombs coming in. And this is important because it's important for us to take a look at what's happening in cities throughout the entire country. Now, this I told you already, that when we talk about the economic costs, we talk about direct costs, material damage, and indirect costs. We're going to talk about those again, but again, do it much shorter than we have in the past. So this is our fourth confrontation, but we're going to concentrate only on this one right now. So when you take a look at the direct cost, so you're basically talking about 40 billion shekel. Now, 40 billion shekel is 2% of GDP. So that's very, very significant. This has already been allocated. It's going to be passed in the budget tonight. That's already allocated for this war, and we expect it to go up. In other words, that's what they're talking about now. But I don't even think it's going to stop there. And certainly, you're talking about probably an additional 5 billion just for Hezbollah. And the question is how long this is all going to last. When you take a look at the damages, so as I said before, this is going to be several billion shekel. It could get up to even more. It could get up to 10 billion shekel. We don't know because we don't know yet when this is going to end. And many of those attacks have been very, very damaging. The types of bombings in Israel with the heads that split apart. I forgot the name of it. With the heads that split apart and then do damage in many, many different places. That obviously increases the cost to the country. When you talk about the indirect costs, so again, you're talking about something that is very, very significant. That we have a lot of reservists, especially in Lebanon, but we have a lot of reservists who are serving. That actually obviously takes a hit, and we also have just the loss of things being closed down a little bit. And it's not that things are really closed, but the schools are closed. And when the schools are closed, of course, then many parents can't get out to work. And these schools, we don't know when they're going to open. And if this continues, they could remain closed after Pesach. And we don't know how long that's going to be. I'll just show this graph that I showed before. It's just updated. It's just interesting to see that in Israel, the stock market first did very well. It took off as a result of this war because this war was considered and is still considered something that's very, very important for Israel. That isn't true for the rest of the world. You see the dive in the Dow Jones, the dive in the S&P that was occurring because of the increase, mostly because of the increase in gas prices. And in Israel, it actually took its toll also lately. You can see that the level of the stock market in Israel currently is actually below where it was when the war started. But still, it hasn't fallen anywhere near what's happened in the United States or worldwide. So it's very, very different. Let me just add two additional economic costs that I think are important to pay attention to. One is that exports are falling, and exports are falling in particular. Some European countries are not particularly friendly to Israel, haven't been for quite a while. And the Bank of Israel, in their report that they just put out, are talking about 1 billion shekel of damage to the Israeli economy. And the other thing is that we're worried about immigration from Israel. In particular, we're worried about immigration of young and highly educated families. We have been seeing some of that for a while. And the question is when that will end, how that will change, and what will happen once the war is over. So with that, I'm basically, here is a summary of what it is that we just said, basically. You can take a look. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nir and have him continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Avi. I will try to share my slides now and tell me if it's working. Just a minute. Okay. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, hi everybody, and thank you very much for joining us. This evening, the Knesset is expected to approve the 2026 state budget. Actually, it's almost it's the last week that the Knesset can approve the budget, otherwise we'll go to election in 3 months. In the next few minutes, I will briefly describe Israel 2026 state budget. I will begin with the broad picture of the budget, and then we'll move to the social ministries, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Welfare. Let me start with the government deficit as share of GDP. This slide shows the government deficit as percentage of GDP from 2013 together with forecast to 2029. As you can see, since 2020, in every year up and including 2026, with the exception of 2022, the government deficit was above 4%. Following the war with Iran, in the last month, the government revised its 2026 deficit forecast from 3.9% to 5.1%. So this is in the red color. And according to our estimates, this figure is likely to increase further if the war will continue. Now, let's take a look at how the state budget is structured. We divide the state budget into 4 main parts. The first is spending on social services, which includes expenditure on education, health, welfare, employment, and other social ministries. The second includes defense expenditure, which covers the budget of the Ministry of Defense, the IDF budget, and also budget of the Ministry of National Security. In addition, we examine the government annual interest payments, which, while the category of other includes additional ministries, such as the Ministry of Transport, the Ministry of Economy, the Ministry of Finance, and others. So let's go into the budget. The original 2024 budget was approved back in 2023 before the war. As you can see, the expected defense expenditure was 105 billion shekels. In practice, if we take a look what happened in 2024, defense spending was about almost 200 billion shekels. When 2025 the state budget and the defense budget was planned, it was supposed to amount around 155 billion shekels. But at the end of the year, actual spending in 2025, following the war we had with Iran in June and the continue of the war in Gaza, the defense budget was 188 billion shekels. And also we can see that the Israeli interest payment rose significantly. It was what was expected to be 45 billion shekels in 2024, and we paid in the end of 25 around 58 billion shekels interest payment. Now let's take a look on 2026. The state budget to 2026 was originally planned by the government before the war with Iran, and the defense expenditure was supposed to be 168 billion shekels. And the interest payment, 65 billion shekels, which is 20 billion more than what was expected to be in 2024. Now, following the war, the government has revised the budget, and the defense budget increased to 200 billion shekels. And as I said earlier, it might increase in the next few weeks or months. In addition, we can also see it in the other part that the government added another 10 billion shekels to the budgetary reserves. So there's another almost 10 billion shekels there. So now the state budget is going to be the highest in the history of Israel with more than 600 billion shekels. But as we can see, there was a lot of changes to the budget. So as I said earlier, we increased the budget defense with around 40 billion shekels. And also there's a reserve of about 6 billion shekels for civilian expenditure and also security expenditure. And we did it by 2 ways. One is we increased the deficit to 5.1%. And also there was across the board cut in government ministries of around 2 billion shekels, and I will elaborate more about what happened in the social ministries. But the big question is what will be next? What will be the situation when the war will finish? How much money will need to add more to the defense and security expenditure? Will we increase the deficit, or what will happen to the social ministries? With that, I'm going to move to the social ministries. And if you saw the numbers in the last graph, so between 2025 and 2026, we increased the number of the budget of the social ministries by 13 billion shekels. This is a substantial amount, but this is still lower than the addition to the social services budget that we had before the war in previous years. Here we can see where the money went. Most of the additional funding for social services went to the Ministry of Education, which received additional 7 billion shekels. And also we can see that the Ministry of Health, which received a large increase of around 4 billion shekels. For the other categories shown in the graph, I will be happy to share and elaborate more in the Q&A session that we will have in the end. But now I'm going to dive into the social ministries. Before that, I want to show you a little bit about what happened in the last few weeks. In the last few weeks, as I said earlier, the government did some cuts across all the different ministries. And we can see here that there was cuts of more than 2 million shekels in the Ministry of Education, more than 100 million shekels in the Ministry of Health, and also in the Ministry of Welfare. And maybe we'll see more cuts in the future. So the numbers that I'm going to show you today are the numbers without the cuts. These are the numbers that they are going to be approved today by the Knesset, and these cuts will be applied in the next few weeks or months, again, by the government and the Knesset. So I'm going to start with the Ministry of Education. And here we can see the goals of the Ministry of Education for 2026. We can see, and you can read it by yourself, and we can send you the presentation. So they are talking about reducing disparities and giving more money for exams of mathematics, and also special education, and to Tkuma and Nufa. These are the localities and communities in the north and the south, and also investing more in STEM fields. And you can read the different priorities of the Ministry of Education. But we want to take a deeper look into the money, where the money goes. And the most significant increase within the Ministry of Education budget is in special education. In recent years, we have seen a sharp rise in the number of students in special education classrooms in Israel. Over the past 6 months, the Taub Center has published 2 studies analyzing in depth the increase in the number of students in special education, both in preschools and in schools. And you can see here in the line, it's the blue one here, we see the large increase in special education, that it's much more than in other fields of education in Israel. In other words, the education system is receiving more funding, but the budget increase is not being reflected in improvements to the education system in Israel for students overall. Instead, it is largely being used to cover the growing cost of students who are eligible for special education services. Let's see what happened in the education budget since the war began. So in Israel, there has been extensive public discussion in recent years about the budget allocated to specific population groups in the coalition agreements. And the Ministry of Education is one of the most prominent ministries in which such budgets are allocated. Following the war, there was no change in the overall budget allocated to the Ministry of Education, but there were changes within the budget itself. As you can see here, the ministry reserve budget was declined by more than 1 billion shekels, and some of these funds were directly allocated mainly towards the Jewish studies and towards financing of coalition agreements for special population groups in Israel. So it's the same amount going to the Ministry of Education, but now we can see that it's going more for specific targets and groups. I want to move and speak now briefly about the Ministry of Health. we can see again the main priorities of the health ministries. They are talking about the health workforce and how much they need to invest that will have enough personnel that will work in the health system in Israel. They're also talking about strengthening the community-based care in Israel and also other parts, so I won't go all over it, and you will have the chance to see it. I want to speak a little bit about mental health. This is another major challenge in the healthcare system. We are seeing tens of thousands of Israelis who have already been diagnosed with recognized mental health injuries as a result of the war, some of them civilians and some of them soldiers. In addition, there has been significant increase in the use of sleep medications in Israel and also antidepressant medications. And the Ministry of Health in Israel has invested 1.4 billion shekels in advancing major reform for improving mental health services, but this is not enough. At the Taub Center, we are currently raising support for an initiative that will focus on mental health and well-being in Israel. This is one of the most important issues for study, and there is still significant shortage of data and accumulated knowledge and research in this area. I will speak briefly about the Ministry of Welfare. In the Ministry of Welfare and Social Affairs, we are seeing significant budget increase in 2026, almost 2 billion shekels. However, in conversations we had with some professionals in the Ministry of Welfare and also the Ministry of Finance, it appears that most of the increase reflects the change in the way that they are calculating the budget base. In most years, the Ministry of Welfare would receive budget additions only towards the end of the year. The change being made now is significant because the Ministry of Welfare is going to receive the money in the beginning of the year, and they don't need to fight to get it during the year. So it's better that the Ministry of Welfare will be able to manage the resources better, but it doesn't mean that they have a lot of money to spend, more money to spend. Within the Ministry of Welfare, the main budget additions are directed towards services for people with disabilities and for the implementation of the legislation for people with disabilities in Israel. Also, they're investing in workforce support and for for welfare departments in local municipalities, and also towards expanding the range of social programs in different ministries. We can see here the priorities of the Ministry of Welfare for 2026. The main priorities is getting more support for programs and for the community, and also we can see giving more services for Tkuma region and for communities in the north, and also we're strengthening the workforce, the workforce, as I said earlier, so you can read it by yourself. And I will finish with some concluding insights when we are looking on the budget. So we can see that there's still more budget going to the social services, that we don't see cuts in the budget for social services, but it's mainly for national growth. It's not for improving the social services in Israel. We saw that there's permanent increase in the defense budget and also in how much we are paying interest payments. And we know that we don't know what will be the total cost of the war. And we expect that during the next few years, it will be difficult to increase the budget for the social services in Israel. And this is a major issue. We can see when we are looking at the different ministries, social ministries, that we have some shared challenges, especially recruiting people to the public sector, and this is a major issue. And also there are other issues that we need more attention when we are looking on the budget. It's mental health, it's early childhood, also the situation of the National Insurance Institute, and we need to make sure that we are investing a lot of money in the north and also in the south. And we're waiting to see what will be the results of the vote today in the Knesset for the 2026 budget, and then the government will start working not only on the expenditure of the 2026 budget, but also with trying to think about what will be the 2027 budget, which will be with a new government after the election that we'll have at the end of the year. So with that, I will end, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Nir and Avi, and I think we will hear from Miri for a few minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions for all three speakers.
I kind of want to start with the questions, but I'll dive in. It's one of the only times that when I get to speak, I actually feel that after Nir, anything I say is going to be less depressing than what you just presented, okay? I'm just like, I wrote at the end, oi, but we'll get to that in the questions. I'm going to make 3 comments, and I want to remind everybody that it is March 29th, that we are in the 30th day. We've been in this for a full month, and everybody goes, oh my God, till when? So when we say, me and others, that this will last 4 to 6 weeks, or 6 to 8 weeks, when you're in the 5th week, that's where you are. It's about momentum. It's about targeting. It's a very, tiring stage, but it's still within the ideas, the objectives, as the Israel Air Force, jointly together with the US, continue to attack that whole list of targets. And I'm saying that because we want to know about the end game. So I'm just saying Israel said 6 to 8 weeks. The United States said 4 to 6 weeks. We're in the 5th week. That gives you an idea of the horizon. And in the meantime, it's still pounding those different types of targets. But the issue has become the economic issue of the Hormuz Straits, and hand in hand with that, the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. And here I want to give you an idea of the challenge I say as Israelis. Because in Israel, the aspect of the Straits of Hormuz are not the main focus. We follow the United States, and we certainly understand that. But the challenge right now in that sense is what will be done to open the Straits of Hormuz. And here, as you can understand, there are 2 options. You can negotiate it open, or you can physically, militarily try to open it. If you negotiate, that means that you stop fighting, you're negotiating, and you arrive at an agreement. And when I say you, that's the US. You want to arrive at an agreement with Iran, and there's a whole list. We have the 15 points, we have the other things, but we need to understand that that's something that's happening, and parallel to that, you can try and do it militarily. As I say, it's things that happen parallel. And for it to be a credible threat that also impacts any negotiations, the United States is accumulating ground troops to the term that I abhor called boots on the ground. There's pretty much zero support for that in the United States. I'm not being happy about this. This isn't something happy, but again, you have to open the Hormuz Straits. This is something that's impacting world economy and, more importantly, perhaps for the President of the United States, his own standing inside the United States. But to do so, negotiations, compromise, not negotiations, either boots on the ground, credible threat. When it comes to boots on the ground, there are 2 options there as well. One is to take over the island that none of us ever heard about until the last few weeks, called Haraj Island, which is near Iran, but it's an island that has 90% of the oil refineries. And if you conquer that, take that over, then you are stopping Iran. Again, that would be more as I don't want to call it a negotiation tactic, but it would be, it's like you do that to have leverage. Okay, it gives you more leverage because at the end, the idea is to open up the Hormuz Strait. There's no easy way to conquer that island. And even more than that, that would be an operation that would not be overnight. That takes time. And the other military option is to physically hold the 2 sides of the Hormuz Strait. The southern side is the United Arab Emirates and Oman. The northern side is Iran. And that's bichlal, as we say in Hebrew, a real big ground operation. Everything's out there. That's the United States. Israel is not directly involved. And I go back, negotiations, open up the Hormuz Strait. That would impact us as well. I mentioned the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The Houthis, the Yemenite Shiites who are in the southern part of Yemen, and that they physically are the ones who overlook and border the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is the other international shipping route. Both of these are international shipping routes. This is totally against international law. It's internationally open. I'm not going down that they're doing as terror organizations and terror regimes. But the Houthis fired against Israel, and the question is, are they going to try now to also stop any kind of shipping that's going through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and that goes up towards the Mediterranean Sea via the Suez Canal? So again, this is something where it's much more about the United States. It's about the negotiation. It's about making sure that both of these straits are open. Will it be done through the negotiations? Will it be done through military action? And the last portion of this is that Hezbollah, like the Houthis, are a proxy. And Hezbollah opened an additional front against Iran, and now the Houthis have. For Israel, when it comes to the one front where it's different, it's because it borders us. You just listen to what it's doing both up north to the different, I mean, we haven't even spoken about in the last 2 weeks. There's a difference in that sense between the north, which is very close because they have no alert time, so they can't do any kind of business at the end. Let's be truthful, inside Tel Aviv, you can sit at a coffee shop. And then there's the 5 to 7 minutes, and you walk to your bomb shelter. But I was at a coffee shop this afternoon, and there was an alert. And so you go to and there wasn't even a siren at the end. I'm just saying there is some kind of business. Up north, nothing. It can be from 0 to 15 seconds to 30 seconds. So for Israel, the Hezbollah front of Hezbollah firing its capabilities, the drones, the missiles, the mortars, etc., into Israel. And I'm not saying it's secondary, they're attacking the Israeli troops. The challenge is the Israeli civilians in the north of Israel. So that there is already, I wouldn't call it a divergence of different objectives, but for Israel, when the United States brings about the end to the Hormuz Straits through negotiations, or if it grows into a military confrontation, that's up to the United States, and we're continuing the attacks against Iran. But when it comes to Hezbollah and what they're doing up north, that's a divergence. And the last point is that I think that when we look at the objectives, that diminishing, that degrading, we're a month into it, and we have this tendency to go, you saw the graphs, because the graphs show that both in the sirens and the attacks, I know it sounds horrible. It's like statistically, we're doing fine, but that doesn't make anybody feel any better. And I state that right now because militarily, we're diminishing and degrading. When it comes to the home front, which is what we do also in that sense, the Taub Center, and I say that from the bottom of my heart, 4 to 6 weeks is a very long time when you're in that 5th week. But at this stage along the way, statistically, and it's a horrible thing to say militarily, we're still at a stage where we have succumbed to significantly less than what the military thought would be inside Israel. And I know that doesn't make anybody feel any better, but when you go to an operation like this, when you go and start this type of a campaign and this type of war, it was taken into account that there would be way more casualties on the home front. And that has to do with the structure that was built in all of the years before. I'll stop at that one there. As I said, the focus right now, Hormuz Straits, that's the key that will bring the end game. Hard to say. Could be tomorrow morning. They could arrive at a negotiation and say it's over. It could be a few weeks of negotiation, and there could be boots on the ground. Ad kan.